Welcome to TickerTalk. This week, wow, it felt like our listeners basically mainlined every bit of financial news about potential China trade movements. And then you sent us the frantic play-by-play. So let's ditch the doom scrolling for a bit, maybe ignore the knee-jerk reactions. We've waded through those headlines. And let's be honest, some were more reliable than others to try and figure out what's actually going on. And more importantly, what it might mean for the markets. Think of this as your shortcut to sounding like you know what's up at the next water cooler chat. Now, really quick, but super crucial point here. We are absolutely not your financial gurus. Okay? This isn't advice. It's just us kind of nerding out over the numbers and trying to connect the dots based on the info that's out there. You're the pilot of your own portfolio. We're just, pointing out some interesting cloud formations along the way.
All right, so this whole China trade situation feels like we keep hearing about progress, but then you squint and it's hard to actually see it right. What's the real story behind the headlines you all flag for us?
Yeah, it's intriguing, isn't it? Right from the outset, you get this narrative of substantial progress. That specific phrase came out of the U.S.-China talks. The U.S. Treasury Secretary used those exact words, even thanked the Swiss for hosting, which, it paints this picture of a pretty civilized, productive meeting.
Okay.
And there was even a little hint dropped about something potentially getting signed.
Right. So the initial vibe is definitely upbeat, like both sides are about to exchange, I don't know, metaphorical high fives over a done deal.
Aw.
But then the specifics get about as clear as mud.
Exactly. You had a U.S. Representative, Greer, expressing confidence, saying that whatever gets signed will help with the trade deficit. And that sounds good, obviously, on the surface.
Sure.
But the actual nuts and bolts of this so-called progress, like what was agreed, which sectors are involved, what's the deal with tariffs, all of that remains, a mystery wrapped in an enigma, really.
Huh. It's like being promised this amazing gourmet meal, right? But all you actually get is this tantalizing smell wafting from the kitchen. You're hopeful, but you haven't actually seen any food yet.
That's a perfect analogy, actually, and it really raises a fundamental question. What does substantial progress even mean in this context? One interpretation, and our source material kind of hinted at this, is that maybe the U.S. is strategically shaping the narrative.
Oh, okay.
Creating this aura of, forward movement without actually committing to concrete details yet.
Like saying you're almost done with a marathon when you've just tied your shoes.
Something like that, yes. It feels a bit incomplete.
And it's not just the missing details that feel a bit off, is it? Your source also mentioned the unusual silence, the lack of leaks. Normally, with something this big, you'd expect at least a whisper or two making its way through the grapevine, right?
That's a very, very astute observation. Typically, for major trade agreements, there's usually some unofficial info trickling out. You hear things. The fact that we're hearing crickets this time, it could suggest one of two things, really.
Okay.
Either one, nothing definitive has actually been reached, or two, the details are being guarded with, extreme secrecy.
Makes you wonder what they're not telling us.
It certainly does.
Now, shifting gears just a little bit, your source also highlighted the market's reaction, which was, kind of subdued, wasn't it? Didn't seem like there were any celebratory fireworks going off in the financial district.
No, and what's particularly noteworthy there is the relative stability of Bitcoin's price.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the logic presented is, look, if a truly game-changing, market-moving trade deal had been announced, you might expect to see a much more enthusiastic response in risk assets, like Bitcoin.
Right.
Its steadiness, its relative calm, it just adds another layer to this whole puzzle. It suggests the market isn't necessarily buying the substantial progress headline, hook, line, and sinker.
So the market's collective shrug, or maybe just a polite nod, could be another sign that this maybe isn't the massive breakthrough some headlines were suggesting.
Precisely. And the source material also included comments from the Minister of Trade,
Okay.
who mentioned, sort of offhand, a number of ongoing discussions, implying that this particular round with the U.S. might just be, one conversation among many, not necessarily one where a firm conclusion was reached.
Gotcha. Like saying you're having lots of meetings, but no actual decisions are being made yet.
That's one way to look at it, yes.
Okay, so we've got this potential for good news, but it's all wrapped up in ambiguity. And the market isn't exactly throwing a party. So looking ahead, what are some potential paths here for the market based on this kind of nebulous situation?
Well, if we step back and try to see the bigger picture, this lack of concrete information, it injects a pretty significant dose of uncertainty into the market. That's the main thing.
Right. Uncertain.
Yeah. Without clear details, tariffs, trade volumes, how it's all enforced investors are basically left guessing. And this ambiguity, it could easily translate into continued market volatility because everyone's just waiting for more clarity.
It's like driving through fog, maybe. You have to proceed cautiously because you just can't see what's really ahead.
Exactly. It's a sophisticated version of we'll see, isn't it?
Yeah.
But with everyone trying to read the tea leaves or the headlines, in the meantime...
So just keep watching closely.
Exactly. The market's going to be hyper-focused on any further announcements, any details, or, frankly, any leaks that might emerge from either side. And as your source also pointed out, let's not forget the upcoming CPI and PPI data this week.
Oh, right. Economic data dump.
That's going to add another whole layer of potential market influence, completely regardless of what happens or doesn't happen on the trade front. It's shaping up to be a busy week.
Okay. Now, one last little tidbit from your source that I found kind of interesting. It mentioned increased interest in those high-risk, high-reward moonshot stocks.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this whole trade picture?
Yes. That observation about sort of increased appetite for speculative stocks,
Yeah.
sometimes that can be a signal.
A signal of what?
Well, sometimes it indicates a late cycle market phenomenon, or maybe just an elevated level of risk tolerance floating around. It suggests that while, sure, some investors might be cautiously optimistic about broader economic improvements from a potential trade deal, others might just be chasing quick returns in, more volatile assets, potentially riskier stuff.
Okay.
And that doesn't necessarily reflect widespread conviction in a solid, game-changing trade agreement being imminent.
Right. It's more like a segment of the market saying.
Well, if the big picture news isn't clear, let's maybe try our luck with something a little more exciting, maybe.
Got it. So wrapping this up, it really feels like we're in a bit of a holding pattern with this China trade news. Lots of talk, plenty of mentions of progress, but not a whole lot of tangible stuff to really sink our teeth into yet.
Yeah.
And the market seems like it's saying, yeah, show me the receipts.
That sums it up pretty well.
Ultimately, I guess, as always, it just comes back to staying informed, right? Digging a bit deeper than those initial headlines and, maintaining a healthy dose of skepticism when the details are this hazy. Keep your eyes peeled for those concrete announcements because, let's face it, in the world of finance, solid information is still the most valuable currency there is.
Absolutely.
So what stood out to you from this deep dive we just took? What questions are still kind of bubbling up for you? We're always keen to hear your perspective. You know where to find us on the socials. Drop us a line. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Until our next exploration, keep those critical thinking gears turning. And remember, this was just us unpacking the news together, definitely not handing out any stock tips.
And just one final thought. Remember, sometimes the absence of news or the absence of detail can be just as telling as the news itself. Keep an eye on what isn't being said, too.
Good point. All right, until next time on Ticker Talk.